Friends, we often see perfect families on social media, don't we? The kind that makes you think, wow, I wish my life was like theirs. But is it really like that? Well, imagine this. A family that has sold us a perfectly polished, ideal image for years suddenly starts losing control of their own story. But here's the thing. The real shock isn't that things are falling apart now. The real shock is those cracks we're seeing today. They were always there. We just didn't see them. Or maybe, we weren't allowed to see them. In today's video, I'm going to talk about some dark truths and the hidden cracks behind the scenes of the Duggar family. Things that might genuinely surprise you when you hear them. I've gathered information that's completely unfiltered. And honestly, if you don't watch till the end, you might miss how much was actually going on behind that perfect image. So, let's take that mask off together. For years, the Duggar family seemed untouchable. A big, happy family. Strong values. A clean, perfect image. A brand that felt carefully built. And even more carefully protected. But now, looking back, it feels like more than just an image. It feels like something that was managed, controlled, and maintained. And this is where everything starts to change. The story really revolves around the parents. Together, they didn't just build a family. They built a public identity. And that identity became the foundation of their show. When the show was at its peak, it wasn't just popular. It was influential. It represented a lifestyle, a belief system, a version of family life that stood out from everything else on TV. But here's the catch. That image had to be protected from the very beginning. Because when your identity becomes your product, every mistake becomes a threat. And this is where PR management comes in. Not just as a one-time fix, but as something consistent and intentional. And recently, what changed everything was connected to exactly that. Because what came out through legal processes and public reports wasn't just about personal actions, but about how things were handled. Behind the scenes, there were messages, there were statements that suggested protecting the show and protecting the image was a priority. And honestly, that changes how people see this entire story. Because for years, the narrative was simple. A strong family, facing challenges together. But now, it looks more like a system designed to keep problems out of the public eye. And that changes everything. Looking back at the beginning, the Duggar family was presented as something different. Strict discipline, strong beliefs, a very structured lifestyle. And that structure is what made them stand out. But at the same time, it created pressure. Because once you put that image out there, you have to maintain it. And this is where things get complicated. Because maintaining perfect is not easy. It requires control. You have to decide what people see and what they don't. That's not unusual in television. But in this case, the gap between public image and private reality felt much wider. And from that gap, the story slowly started to unravel. The first major turning point came in 2015, when news about Josh Duggar's past misconduct surfaced. This wasn't a small controversy. It directly challenged the family's core image. And suddenly, everything changed. The show was cancelled. The backlash was intense. Statements were released, interviews were given, and efforts were made to manage the situation. But here's why this matters. People didn't just question what happened, they questioned how it was handled. And that's a big difference. Because facing a crisis is one thing, but managing it to protect something bigger, that's something else entirely. And that's what caught people's attention. Even after the original show ended, the family stayed in the spotlight. Through spin-offs and media appearances, the brand didn't disappear, it adapted. But the trust wasn't the same anymore. And over time, more details started coming out. Court cases, testimonies, documents, each piece adding more context. And slowly, everything started to connect. What's interesting is how long the earlier image lasted. For nearly a decade, people believed a certain version of the story, and that doesn't happen by accident. It suggests consistency, strategy, and yes, PR. And this is where Josh's comments become important. Because if PR really was a priority, then it changes how people interpret everything that came before. And this is where it gets deeper. The story shifts from a family dealing with problems to a family managing perception. And those are two very different things. This is where many viewers start to feel disconnected, not just disappointed, but like they didn't see the full picture. And once that feeling sets in, rebuilding trust becomes difficult. Another important part of this is the impact on the children. They grew up on camera. Their lives became part of the show. Their identities tied to the family brand. And this is where it becomes emotional. Because when image comes first, you start to wonder how much space was left for real experiences, for struggles, for honesty. Reality TV always blurs that line. But here, that line felt tightly controlled. And that kind of control comes at a cost. Some of the adult children have spoken about their experiences. Not all, and not always the same way, but enough to show that the story isn't as simple as it once seemed. And that matters, because now the focus shifts from the family as a brand to the individuals within it. And that's a big change. Once, the image was unified, consistent. Now, it feels fragmented, complex, and more real. The public reaction changed too. At first, there was admiration. But after the controversies, opinions became divided. Some still support them, others are critical, and many have simply moved on. That's what often happens. When trust is broken, it doesn't always turn into anger. Sometimes, it just fades away. And that's exactly what we're seeing now. The Duggar brand doesn't hold the same power anymore. The shows are gone. The image isn't what it used to be. And the idea of them being reality TV royalty feels like a thing of the past. What stands out here is how quickly perception can change once new information comes out. For years, the image was strong. And then slowly, it began to break. And once that process starts, it's very hard to stop. Maybe the biggest takeaway here is this. Trying to maintain a perfect image comes at a cost. Because perfection is not sustainable. And when appearance becomes the priority, reality eventually finds its way out. The Duggar story isn't just one moment. It's a long process. An image built over time. And then, slowly breaking apart. And now, it feels like that act is finally coming to an end. Not because everything is known, but because the illusion is no longer holding up. And once people see what's behind the scenes, it becomes very hard to believe the image again. So, you've heard the story. These moments, honestly, they really make you think. And I try to bring you stories like this, so you can unwind a little, and reflect at the same time. Because at the end of the day, we all like to understand what's real, and what's not. So, let's not wait any longer. Let's get into this story in detail. Now, Josh Duggar has urged his mother to consider her role after his conviction related to child sexual abuse material. Let's look at what he said. I feel that the public statements and PR work done to protect the show were put ahead of family relationships. And that's still happening today. That's from a message he sent to his mother. In a series of messages, he told Michelle Duggar that both she and Jim Bob Duggar should take responsibility for their role. In another message, he said, I'm disappointed. I feel like you're not accepting any criticism or acknowledging your own actions, even though they've affected my life, including this situation. This came shortly after he was sentenced to 151 months in prison. Following his conviction, Josh has repeatedly claimed that he is innocent, and that someone else downloaded the material onto his computer. After sentencing, he also said, I don't blame you for this situation. But you're blaming me, and you don't even know the truth. He continued to insist that whether his parents believe him or not should not change how they treat him. At one point, he wrote, I don't think you understand how much you've hurt me, and how you're trying to make yourself look good, instead of focusing on what I'm going through. He had shared similar thoughts earlier too, talking about how difficult life in prison has been, while the rest of the family continues their lives outside. Again, he repeated that PR efforts and public appearances were prioritized over relationships. He also said that his mother seemed more focused on image than anything else. At the same time, he claimed he wasn't trying to blame anyone, but still urged her to reflect on her role and make changes so others don't face similar situations. A couple of days later, he even questioned whether the situation could be connected to her own guilt. Michelle, however, did not directly respond to these claims. Instead, she expressed love and shared supportive messages. Josh continues to maintain his innocence and is now making another attempt to appeal his sentence. Recently, his prison term was extended again, and he is now scheduled to be released on February 2, 2033. This marks yet another extension, pushing his original release date further ahead.